Okay, I clicked record. No going back now. Hi, everybody. This is Brendan. And we're into more UFO stuff. This one's really cool. So, we had these hearings recently. Pretty historic. A lot of people excited. A lot of people that have been very versed in the phenomenon for years. Toot my own horn. Didn't really. There were a couple of new things, but most of it was just to have it on the record, have those guys there, and speaking, and all the Congress people were very sober, and it was one of the first times I think I've seen them really not fight. It's very bizarre that. And fitting, I think, that this would be the thing that brings people together and everybody can seem to agree on. So, in the spirit of the occasion, I'm also taking a U.S. history class, and I'm doing all this stuff around the 1700s and before. And this is colonial history, and this is pretty much like some of the first observations around weather and scientific phenomena that we can see, natural phenomena that we could use science to observe in the sky. And well, let's just get going here, shall we? This is a little listicle. It's kind of like a little primer. And then what I found is a few really comprehensive lists of just chronologically. I'm going to start at the 1400s, I think, and go on from there. But it's pretty amazing. So the first one I have to mention here is Edmund Halley, and this is a very famous guy in astronomy and physics. He's not the guy, by the way, that discovered the comet, not the one that observed the comet the first time. He's the guy that applied Newton's theories, I believe, to predict the comet again, and therefore the comet's named after him. So he apparently has seen, it says here he documented Halley's comet. He didn't the first time. Has seen two unidentified craft in his career. The first was in March 1676. He described it as having a vast body, apparently bigger than the moon. By his estimations, it was about 64 kilometers, 40 miles above him. I suppose he'd know what he was looking at. He said it made a noise, like a rattling of a great cart over stones. After watching the distance it traveled, in several minutes he calculated that it was moving faster than 15,500 kilometers per hour. That's 9,600 miles per hour. For us in the States. Now that's odd for us. Nowadays we talk about the 5 observables, and one of those is silence. And usually silent, with a few exceptions. But these are, this sounds like a rocket, but still it's interesting that we would see this. Now, it could have been a meteor. There's a couple instances here where he is in charge of the record keeping kind of for this sort of thing. And he logs a couple other things as meteors, although they're much slower moving than those per se. And so I guess this isn't that great of an example, but he'll come up again. Here we have Alexander the Great. And in 329 BC, this is earlier than I was planning, he and his army were crossing a river during a war, and they saw silver shields with fire around the rims in the sky. The objects began repeatedly diving at the men until the war elephants and horses were spooked. Alexander and his men gave up trying to cross the river and waited until the next morning to cross. And so, you have to wonder what's the next. I'm going to link that up on another tab to find out what's the next thing. And, yeah, flying shields. This is new. I wasn't planning on digging here. And yeah, that's what we read already. I was wondering what happened next. Because, like, if it's auspicious, you know, what was he going to do that day? You know? The remarkable incident was apparently paralleled by an equally fantastic visitation during the siege of Tyre by Alexander in 332 BC. Quoting Giovanni Gustavo Droysen's Storia di Alessandro il Grande, the erudite Italian Alberto Finoglio writes in Clepius, blah, 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 a startling revelation which we now translate. The fortress would not yield. Its walls were 50 feet high and constructed so solidly that no siege engine was able to damage it. The Tyrians disposed of the greatest technicians and builders of war machines of the time, and they intercepted in the air the incendiary arrows and projectiles hurled by the catapults on the city. One day suddenly there appeared over the camp these flying shields. Suddenly from the largest shield came a lightning crash that struck the walls. These crumbled. Other flashes followed, and walls and towers dissolved. I gotta tell you, I've never heard of this one. As if they had been built of mud, leaving the way for the besiegers who poured in like an avalanche through the breaches. So it was auspicious, and Tyre dying. So somebody's working on the sides of on the side of Alexander, but also stopping him in interesting ways too. Very strange. Like, I wonder if they stopped him at the river so he could go on to get that fortress. Aurora, Texas. This is later than I was thinking of looking, but this is pretty well known out there. Years before the UFO Roswell crash, another crash in Aurora, Texas, crashed into Judge Proctor's windmill and exploded into pieces. Badly disfigured Martian pilot was also recovered. Alien writing resembling hieroglyphics. Town decided to bury the body in their cemetery, where it still is today, although someone stole the grave marker. Interesting. So there's an alien body in their cemetery? Word. Okay. This is from before there was, like, military guys to pick this stuff up, I guess. Marseille, France. I hope I'm not butchering that. I did not take French. I took Espanol. But on the evening of August 25th, 1608, near Marseille, France, a single spacecraft seemed to be flying erratically. After this craft stopped in midair, two beings got out and seemed to battle. So they were having a dogfight. And then they got out on top of it. That's some Marvel Comics stuff. Same scene was witnessed over Nice, France, also. Over Nice, France. If it wasn't remarkable enough, a similar UFO battle took place a few miles away in Genoa. Following week, a heavy red rain fell. Interesting. See so many witnesses to the same event in a time when air travel did not exist. I've heard of the red rain falling. That's a thing that happens these days. Some people think that it might be related to micrometeorite bursts in the upper atmosphere. So that's seeding like really rare dust, and that is encouraging bloom of certain kinds of bacteria that they found. Another rabbit hole. So, so that's a natural phenomenon. But so if you have this thing where there's these UFOs battling up there, and you have all these exotic materials being blown off and stuff like that into the atmosphere, it could be those combined with some clouds, maybe precipitated some rain, which is we do cloud seeding to this day. That's pretty well established. It's not controversial. I mean, it is controversial, but there shouldn't be a controversy. So we move on to Nuremberg, Germany. Another one some folks might be familiar with, which is this full-on aerial display dogfight that happened in the skies over Nuremberg. 1561. 2 gigantic black cylinders launched many black and blue balls, blood-red crosses, and white discs. It ended an hour later with several of the shapes flew into the sun. Now I imagine, this is a long time ago. They might have known that the Earth revolved around the sun, but you see these things disappearing toward the sun, maybe to recharge. I don't know, but not into the sun, right? So don't discount this based on that perception. And most of these, you're going to have to read through the perceptions of people of the day. So some context of what they knew at the time helps. Ended an hour later. Some of them flew, so they had a big fight. Some of them flew away, and some actually fell to Earth outside the city. Interesting. Approximately 3 in the length. I don't know what that means. 3 in the length from time to time. 4 in a square. Much remain insulated, and between these balls, one saw a number of crosses with the color of blood. Then one saw 2 large pipes, in which small and large pipes were 3 balls, also 4 or more. All these elements started to fight one against the other. Basel, Switzerland. At dawn on August the 7th, 1566, residents of Basel, Switzerland saw black spheres engaged in a sort of aerial battle over the course of a few hours. I'm slurring my words a little bit, just because it's 3:30 in the morning. Samuel Colchius, who co-signed the events in Basel's Gazette, wrote, At the time when the sun rose, one saw many large black balls which moved at high speed in the air towards the sun, then made half-turns, banging one against the others, as if they were fighting a battle out of combat. A great number of them became red and igneous. Thereafter they were consumed and died out. Interesting. New Zealand, 1909. For about a month in the winter of 1909, we're seeing airships of all these different sizes in New Zealand. Never had any witnesses closer than 100 feet, 30 meters away. During the times of the sightings, no airships were known to be in the sky over New Zealand. Going by the accounts of witnesses, the sighting started in the southern part of New Zealand and moved north before heading to Australia. Boston, Massachusetts. Oh, yeah. So this is John Winthrop, the governor of Massachusetts. And I'm not sure if he saw this himself, but he was relating it. It's a little creepy. Boy, come away. In 1639, a strange light was spotted over Boston. It sped back and forth from the Back Bay Fens across the Charles River and toward Charleston. Governor John Winthrop even made a note about the event in his journal. Let's see. Very well-reputed folks and pious, which of course that was important for these guys. In the year 1, James Everell. In the year 1, okay, so they restarted like their calendar in a sense. James Everell, a sober, discreet man, and 2 others saw a great light in the night at Muddy River. When it stood still, it flamed up and was about 3 yards square. When it ran, it was contracted into the figure of a swine. Oh yeah, it ran as swift as an arrow towards Charleston, and so up and down for about 2 or 3 hours. They were come down in their lighter about a mile. They were come down in their lighter. Okay, well, that's some old English. I'll have to figure out that means about a mile, and when it was over, they found themselves carried quite back against the tide to the place they came from. Divers other credible persons saw the same light after about the same place. So, coinciding with that, I want to... Yeah, that one should be in here, and there's some more. Okay, here's the two from John Winthrop. All right, dude, there's a bunch right here in, this one's in England. This one's in Boston, Massachusetts. So this isn't Winthrop, but April 11th, 1643, so before the Winthrop encounter. A group of men saw two lights arise from the water in the form of a man. Then more people witnessed the event. The lights shot out flame and sparkled. The form moved from its location to a distance and back again on several occasions. The same or similar phenomenon was seen again on the 18th. Source is Paul Devereaux, Earthlights. We'll have to get some historians up in here with the primary sources to verify some of these, but I know that this next one is legit. So, on January 18th, 1644, John Winthrop writes, or catalogs roughly, 3 men coming to Boston saw 2 man-shaped lights coming out of the sea. About 8 p.m., several inhabitants of an area of Boston located near the area saw a light the size of the full moon rise in the northeast. Shortly thereafter, another light appeared in the east. Witnesses observed a curious game of hide-and-seek between the two. During this celestial ballet, several persons known to be sober and pious, who were aboard a boat between Dorchester and Boston, claimed they heard a voice in the sky uttering the following words in a most terrible voice. "Boy, boy, come away!" These calls were repeated about 20 times, coming from various directions. A little strange, yeah. That's straight out of his journal. Boston, Massachusetts again, and this is Winthrop again. Luminous objects were seen sparkling, emitting flames. Again, the aerial ballet of the previous week when observed, and a voice calling out, "Boy, boy, come away." So these are 2 back-to-back on the 18th and 25th and 26th of the 1644. Very shortly, and within a couple of decades of them starting up the colony. Odd. So I'm going to go back over here and continue so that we'll just get through this list. At Windsor Castle in England, at 9:45 p.m. on August 18th, 1783, 4 witnesses saw a luminous object in the sky from the terrace of Windsor Castle. Coffee. What witnesses saw is actually how a meteor would be described at the time, except for the parts about staying still and changing colors. So these guys have already distilled the list a little bit based on what seems odd from what we know today. The following year, an account in the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society related what witnesses observed. An oblong cloud moving more or less parallel to the horizon. Under this cloud could be seen a luminous object which soon became spherical. Brilliantly lit, which came to a halt. This strange sphere seemed at first to be a pale blue in color, but then its luminosity increased, and soon it set off again toward the east. Then the object changed direction and moved parallel to the horizon before disappearing to the southeast. The light it gave out was prodigious. It lit up everything on the ground. Lit up everything on the ground. Typo. And so Tutmos III In the ancient Egyptian Thule papyrus is one of the earliest written accounts of a UFO sighting. The papyrus contains the annals of Pharaoh Thutmose III, who reigned from about 1504 to 1450 BC. And remember that these are backwards, because it's BC. The sighting was said to have happened around 1480 BC. Chroniclers described a circle of fire coming from the sky. It emitted bad breath but had no head. It was 1 rod long and 1 rod wide. Going to look into what a rod is in ancient Egypt. Confused, the scribes bowed down to it and reported it to the pharaoh. Thutmose meditated on the event, and days later the UFOs were more numerous than ever. The pharaoh and his army looked on as the fire circles raised higher into the sky. Incense was burned, and the pharaoh told the scribes to remember the day as a day of importance. Interesting. Jose Bonilla. So, in 1883, Mexican astronomer Jose Bonilla saw objects pass in front of the sun in a hazy mist. He recorded his encounter, writing down what he saw and taking photographs. Bonilla himself never tried to explain it. I doubt that that's his photograph. 3 years later, a French astronomy journal deemed the photographs as high-flying birds or bugs on the lens. In 2011, 3 Mexican astronomers suggested that it's possible that Bonilla saw the pieces of a comet, since in his notes he counted 447 fragments over a 2-day period. So yeah, not all the UAP are aliens. And a lot aren't, because there's a lot of weird stuff going on. More on earth and in heaven than is dreamed of in your philosophy, Sir Horatio. So on October 11th, 1492, this is the Columbus one, while patrolling the deck of the Santa Maria, Christopher Columbus saw a light glimmering at great distance. He quickly called for Pedro Gutierrez, who also saw the light. It vanished and reappeared several times in the night, moving up and down in sudden and passing gleams. Sudden and passing gleams. Columbus said the mysterious lights were a sign that they would find land. 4 hours later, they did. Interesting. A message from the Lord. God be praised. Alright, so let's dig into this other stuff here. 1400, let's go back to the past, Samurai Jack. A little girl appears. Okay, so in the year 1400 in Fundão, Portugal, a little girl disappears for 3 days. She's found, and she finally told when she was taken by a white lady who had offered her to drink in a bell. Interesting. So we'll have to look deeper into that. Some of these don't have a source. And some are kind of like, magical beings, possibly. This is a time people still believed in a lot of that kind of stuff, or at least they interpreted what we might nowadays we have this mythology of extraterrestrials because we know about other planets and other star systems, other galaxies, and so forth. So we imagine beings coming from other worlds, more advanced, and so on. Although knowing that there can be advanced beings, who's to say that they are from necessarily other worlds? And there's plenty of culture around, mystical beings on this planet, plenty enough, and there is a strangeness to it. So a lot of the people in the community want to find a vehicle, a hard vehicle from Zeta Reticuli, and they might, but that might just be one player here. Itchy nose. So let's get on to one of these. The Magnificat, created in the 15th century, depicts the life of Mary. A hat-shaped object can be clearly seen in the tapestry above. Aha. Wow, that looks awfully near. Now, it was weird when I went to read the copy of the Ramayana that I got. There was a object sort of like this on the cover. It was a shade, although there's plenty of inspired. This isn't in that culture, though. And it just strikes me, right? That the Ramayana is full of Vimanas, and the Vimana shape shows up a lot in that culture. In the time of its writing, those Vimanas were seen as common, right? And they would be often cited, and it was just a sign that the gods were always present, so to speak, as well as several different kinds of beings, rishis, devas, all these various beings that would stop by and talk to people, give advice, kind of almost like hyper advanced AI holographic avatars or something. But that's our interpretation. And what is it? Arthur C. Clarke said, technology advanced enough would appear to be magic. So let's go on. This is it's going to take a little bit, but it needs to be done. On the canvas of Masolino da Pinnacale, 1383 to 1440, depicting Jesus and Mary on very non-vaporous lenticular clouds, flat and circular or yeah, I've seen this one before. I'm not sure what to make of that. It could just be really bad artists, which they weren't great, right? This is just at the very beginning of the Renaissance, I think. Although it is interesting that it's associated with this, these images in the sky. I don't think they're all. A lot of these flying saucers, what we would see as flying saucers, are interpreted in these things as clouds, right? So that's important. They're depicted as clouds in the art, but that does not mean that they're necessarily clouds. Although the number of times I've heard of UFOs disguising themselves as clouds from eyewitnesses who I know who were sober and had several people with them is pretty high. So later on, God the Rainbow, you are a drawing dating from 1000 to 1400 after FC. From the province of Catamarca in Argentina, there are locked in the graphics of these fitted caps and connected to the ground by their scales. I don't. I'm afraid to change the tabs. Well, I don't know what it's talking about here. It kind of looks like some indigenous art, sort of UFO-like, but could just as easily be some sort of what did the Inca had these rope things that they would track time and seasons and harvest and wars and all sorts of stuff with, and that's what that is. Completely different, but that's what this reminds me of, some sort of technology. It's definitely technology. Whether it's advanced technology, I don't know. And a lot of indigenous stuff was oriented on a circle, and it looks a little like a medicine wheel. But moving on. So in Russia in 1403, 3 objects appeared in the sky. They were sun-like, emitted blue, green, and crimson rays. They formed a pattern that was something like an arc. The last object was cross-like, great in size, and appeared to remain pulsating at the heart of the moon. Hovered there for over an hour before disappearing. Now that is a legit pretty like straight, like you could copy paste that into today. And my goodness, that is a UFO account. So in Myers Spring Canyon in Texas in 1400, and this is, I guess, circa, we're guessing this was made here. Myers Spring Canyon looks like a shaman standing next to a UFO. I don't know where our UFO is. So this is that our shaman? Okay. I don't say it. Is that it? I don't know. Okay. Maybe there's some like cultural interpretation here. Dude or dudette might just know a little bit more about petroglyph interpretation than I do, but I just don't understand. Not saying that's a dud, because there's a lot of interesting petroglyphs, but that one's not especially, I mean, they're wild. They're really wild, but that one's not especially interesting to me yet. Somebody explains it to me. In China, stars like light yellow, a dragon. Yeah, so when they say dragon, they're saying comet, kinda. Although if it makes this list, it's different, right? So we don't know about that comet. It could be just a normal comet. With stars like light yellow. Interesting. So it could be a comet breaking up. Individual stars, individuated. Although it could also be describing an object that has lights on the side. So in China, this says 140 watt. This type. What's a question? This is an old Chinese illustration from a fictional book entitled "Illustrated Survey of Weird Countries" and had the following original caption. The people in Jigung land, the people would make flying cars that traveled far with a suitable wind. In Tarng's day, 1700 BC, Jigung people flying a car on a westerly reached Tuzhou. Tarng dismantled their car so it could not be demonstrated to the people. Later an east wind came on, which he had them fly the car back to their own country. Flying cars. Or carts. Interesting. Yeah, in the Ramayana, there's Ravana's machine. That's the bad guy. He has a machine, a golden machine that comes and goes. He has his own personal hot rod, basically, which does a lot of whirring and swirling and a little bit UFO-like. But it's described differently from a lot of the Vimanas, I think. He has a little bit of a sport model going. 15th century fresco seems to show Jesus in a rocket-type device. Notice that the attendants seem to be wearing helmets like a glass globe. Space helmets from popular science fiction more than simple halos. These completely encircle the heads. And it could just be, there's such a thing as bad artists even in the medieval times, right? And so the halos, that does look very rocket-like, and but it could also just be a really interpretative, an interesting way of interpreting the previous artworks. So you never know. 3 stars were seen to fly over Rome in 1408. The incident was described by Antonio di Pietro, canon of the Vatican, in his Diarium Romanum, Diary of Rome, from 1404 to 1417. Suddenly after sunset, we saw a beautiful star that, coming from the sky of Tarion, headed towards Castel Sant Angel, with 2 other small, splendid, bright stars, and we were all very surprised by that spectacle. Interesting. Now, so that is, we're reading through, and there's plenty of accounts of meteors and stuff like that. That sounds like it was different. And I'm not sure if they, saw meteors, or they probably didn't understand what meteors were yet, right? But they probably saw them. And those would be recorded as something different, I imagine. These sound like stars. People knew what stars were. They didn't know what they were, but they knew what they were. They saw them. They know what you see with a star. All right. And stars don't have tails when they move. So, steel rod seen in the sky for an hour and a quarter, 1411. It's pretty. That's another copy paste to today. Lots of those. That day took place the Battle of Agincourt, which was won by British troops of Henry V, with those of French superior numbers. English archers that day were considered the real winners, but most of them affirmed that they had subsequently been helped by fiery beings that moved through the air at high speed and throwing rockets fire on the enemy. We cannot exclude the use of powder at the time known and widely used in conflicts. Well, there was gunpowder and stuff like that. Fiery beings, though, that move through the air at high speed and throw rocket on the enemy. Interesting. Now, they had catapults and they had different things. That doesn't sound like any known, cannon or musket I've heard of. That's really bizarre. And to just suddenly, they're in the middle of this war. There's no, other tech, other foreigners coming in. That sounds like Greek fire or something like that. Nobody's doing that. That is interesting. And I've seen, we talk about these objects that they see in battle spaces. They're not interfering with the outcome, but they are seen. In the evening, so we have here beings sort of interfering with history, possibly, in several ways. It's really bizarre. And that comes up a lot. In the evening, a Hungarian merchant, Peter Taglim. His whole thing is full of names I'm having a hard time pronouncing. Miscalculation. Wrong time of night to be reading things that I can't pronounce. Leading his herd of cattle to this place, came to an area of thick brush close to Castel de Blas. Realized he'd lost his way. All around him were only shadows, the woods, and deep silence. In despair, Peter started praying, and suddenly he saw a great light. Still trying to realize where he was and what was happening, Peter saw a young woman of great beauty. He told him how to get to the road towards where he was going, but requested that a chapel be built at that place. She planted a cross in the earth as proof of her visit. Peter found his herd and reached the leaders of the community to fulfill the mandate he'd received. At first, no one believed him, but they found the cross planted in the woods. This convinced them that they decided to erect a chapel where people came in solemn processions. I suppose he could have erected the cross, but, how did he do that? And was there something special about the cross? And that's not the first time that there are stories of angelic type beings that, they're described as angels or normal looking people, but of great beauty, that there's some shiny people, golden people, these kinds of things. wearing, outfits that we would consider to be maybe light spacesuits, or even, if they saw somebody from today wearing like nylon, that'd be pretty weird. Be like, wow, that's really shiny material. The lenticular clouds in this 1420 painting are rare and involve them in some UFOs by form on the concept of camouflage or hidden form during penetration of a craft in the atmosphere. So this the writer of these posts needs to. It's grammar. Interesting. Okay, so I see these shapes here. Those are pretty familiar looking shapes. There's a distinct seam along the middle here. Yeah, right? And that is, we see that today. Those aren't so interesting. It could be lenticular cloud misapprehensions of lenticular clouds, but context helps. Was there anything very specific happening here that looks like a battle or something going on? And we see these things happening in battles. So, Baptism of Christ by Fra Angelico. That's a pretty UFO looking thing right there. The sky of Forlì was again driven by strange things. In 1428 in Forlì, Italy. The 3rd day of March at 1:30 at night, for many, many people and trustworthy in all things, was seen in the city of Forlì above the Friar's Manor, a very high flame-shaped tower was a column that seemed to fire rising into the air. People saw them, many of them monks, and also those of the plains. That same day, March 3rd, a lamp of fire in the air, which lasted from 3 o'clock to the hour of the night. Wow. So, from 3 o'clock in the afternoon until the end of the night. That sounds like rockets or something. But that's not supposed to be happening. Oh yeah. 1431, Angkor Wat. Entire population of the village mysteriously vanished. Large airships were seen in the area. I have to chase that down. I'm not sure if we really know what exactly happened. Or do we? It's established it kind of fell apart on its own, possibly, but it's been a mystery for a long time. Angkor Wat is beautiful, by the way. One of the places I really want to visit someday when I'm free. Over 3 months in Italy, multiple witnesses saw globes of light, golden in color, both inside and outside a church. Said the monk. Returning to the church, he and his companion saw a globe as thick as a printing press. Another guy stated he saw more lights day and night moving around the church and leaving a smell of remarkable sweetness. Don Massimo is careful to add that the mayor and others who ran into the church saw nothing, but they did notice the smell. And witnesses and people seeing different things is common. I know that sounds convenient, but that's convenient to the teller, not to the people that are expected to believe. But that does happen, and you'll have several witnesses to something, and then other witnesses that are also there at the time see nothing, or see something different that's less spectacular, or sometimes something just as spectacular but still different. That's the case in the Fatima sightings. Wow, this goes on. So I really underestimated how much was here in this section of early 1400s. We'll do a couple more. I might have to turn this into a series, guys. I literally had these others queued up, but I don't think we're going to get there. So I'm an hour in. So if it, by popular demand, comes back, we also have the 1500s, 1550 on to 1569. We have 1570 on to 1599. We have 1600 on to 1649, 1650 on to... we have it on to 1799 here. That's where I wanted to go with it. Really, really freaking phenomenally interesting stuff, dudes. And so this has all been happening for a long, long time. I hope people realize that. This is not new. I myself wrote my very first research paper ever, actually, on this, and included some of these things, but I think I started it somewhere around... No. I didn't mention things that were this old. I started around 1947, because the hypothesis I've heard a lot and people go with is often, well, they came because of the nuclear bombs, and that's when they really started to take an interest. But that's just... maybe the frequency changed. Maybe the number of people looking changed. Maybe the number of cameras changed. But that's not when they showed up, guys. So we'll do this. I hope it's a good one. Every night during the siege by the Turks, a fire descended from the sky, stood over the city, and enveloped her with light all night long. At first, the Christians read this light as a sign of God's wrath and the coming destruction of the city, but initial success against the Turks led to the reinterpretation that God had sided the Christians and that they would prevail. Thus the Sultan and his entire retinue became visibly depressed and were considering lifting the siege. On the night before their scheduled departure, the heavenly sign descended in its customary manner, but did not envelop our city as it had before. Now it seemed to be far away, then scattered quickly and vanished at once. The Sultan and his court were immediately filled with joy. Alright, so this is the siege of Constantinople. It's a pretty important piece of history. Right? And presumably they continued. And it's interesting, actually, that Constantine saw... that's way, way back, but Constantine saw an object too. I mean, he saw a vision of Venus, the morning star, the Christian star. That's what caused him to convert the Roman Church to Catholicism, as he said. And then, of course, that unleashed a lot of bloody war on the world. And so here, we may see that the shift is occurring. So at the time that Constantine gets his vision, establishes the church, they're the chosen ones, right? And here it's like a shifting of the guard. Now y'all screwed up and went around killing a bunch of peeps, and by the way, burned Alexandria and knowledge and stuff. And so, and consider that the Ottoman Turks were actually very advanced for the time and extremely scientific, invented a whole lot of optics and a whole lot of sailing technology. The Crusades brought us the lateen sail, which allowed us to go, the clipper ships to leave the shore and stuff and get to the New World, discovering new things. That, that technology, those triangular sails were known at the time to Middle Eastern cultures, but not to Europe. And so that changed a lot of things. Anyway, It's just very, very phenomenally bizarre and interesting. Cool. I think I'll do one more. Let's find a really good one. The moon changed colors 3 times, then disappeared. Interesting. Now, supposedly, if that was a solar eclipse or lunar eclipse, we would be able to track that. So it's here. So we can't go back in time and distant suns or anything like that to see that. And so it's interesting. There is a phenomenon called transience on the moon, and it's still controversial, but it's been verified by a couple of different people, and we still don't really fully understand it. I think it has to do with lunar dust in the atmosphere on the moon. Yes, there's a very, very thin atmosphere of dust and some particles on the moon. And so my operating theory is all those craters pick up and reflect the space energies, microwaves, all sorts of different kinds of stuff, high energy particles toward the center there, possibly charging up kind of a natural particle accelerator. You've seen it here when we were talking about Skinwalker Ranch and the Wichita Basin and the basin that contains Pumapunku and these kinds of things that might be natural particle accelerators. So the moon might have that going on, creating transients. And, again, maybe similar phenomena to what we see in these places here that have this happening. And between October 1st, this last one, numerous and marvelous signs like great firebrands the length of 4 fathoms and a foot large were seen in the air. It lasted for half of a quarter of an hour and was 7.5 minutes of an hour and was seen twice. Some people also said that they had seen by night the like of a battle and heard a great uproar and noise. 2 significant meteor showers happened. Sightings must have been caused by these events, but meteors wouldn't account for the report of great uproar and noise. Unless one of them crashed. So that was a meteor. It doesn't count. Iron rod of good length and as large as 1/2 of the moon was seen in the sky over Arras, France for less than a quarter of an hour. This object was also described as being shaped like a ship from which fire was seen flowing. Okay. Bizarre. Well, guys, let me know if this was interesting for you. I want to do some more, and I don't know what else I can say. If it doesn't seem like we're not alone at this point, and we haven't been alone for a long time, then I guess you're just not paying attention. It's really good to have a skeptical mindset to a degree, but if these are data points and these are observations, and this isn't under a controlled experiment per se, but it does matter. And the fact that these sightings seem in many ways to directly reflect the ones we're seeing today exactly is interesting and important. So I'll leave it there, and let me know, subscribe, let me know in the comments if you want more of this. and we'll make this a thing. History UFO series coming up. Talk to you soon. Bye.